much for the invitation. I mean, the first session was very interesting, and I hope I give my contribution to the second one to make it equally interesting. I see two main dynamics at the international level. The great power dynamic, state-centered, we discussed this in the first panel. And then there is a second dynamic that we can call global governance, which is much more pluralist, in which, of course, states are important and great powers are, of course, important. But there is a plethora of different actors that are equally significant and relevant. And my feeling is that if we don't understand well their sort of actions in the wider international system, we would fail to capture the real sort of dynamics there. So I'm going to talk about this second level. I'm going to talk about non-state actors, and rather more specifically, I'm going to talk about how non-state actors engage and create synergy and partnership with governments and with intergovernmental institutions, because I think it is precisely in their synergy where the action is. And so, not talking about networks in general or singly, as was a bit mentioned in the Q&A in the first session, but looking at these actors in their engagement with states and governments, okay? And second, I'm going to talk in a more comprehensive way. I'm not only going to talk about the goodies, but goodies and baddies, and well, the two things are controversial. But before that, let me give you my 2 cents to the previous discussion, diverting a bit from the topic. But going back to the discussion in the first panel, I have to say that, yes, of course, I do see also a great sort of power dynamics there, and this dynamics is shaped fundamentally by 4 great powers, which is, of course, US and China, but then also Russia and the EU, where if we want to develop a strategic reflection about this, obviously the relationship between US and China is central. But it is equally important to look at the positioning of EU and Russia with one or the other. It seems to me that we need to look at how these 2 other actors sort of align themselves with one or the other to understand strategically in the mid-long term what is going to happen in international affairs. I mean, it's clearly that one scenario is the 2-block scenario, the kind of new polarism that we are witnessing today. But then there are other 2 scenarios which are hypothetical, I granted, I mean, it's not for today, but these, we should not, I think, underestimate them, and we should take them into consideration if we want to develop a strategic thinking. And one scenario, obviously, is that Russia goes back into Europe with EU and China, and US and China remain restricted and isolated. But equally, the other scenario is that the EU and Russia slide into this Eurasian integration project, and the American goes adrift in this American solitude that some commentators talk about. And of course, these are hypothetical scenarios, but very clearly, I mean, we can see them. And I think if we take this kind of strategic perspective, I wonder whether it's really wise to push Russia in the hands of China. It seems to me a tactical but a very bad strategic choice. And it's not only a matter of inclusion, but it's rather precisely a strategic sort of thinking about the mid-level. Anyway, let me move back to my original topic, that is non-state actors. And I hope with this I will clarify some of my sort of preliminary comments. It is clear that the politics in our age is much more complex than in previous times. There are states, but then there is a plethora of different actors, international gatherings, terrorist groups, philanthropic foundation, think about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, social movements, international NGOs, national diasporas, alternative media, WikiLeaks, singers, think tanks, as this one that invited us here, banks, and big financial actors, rating agencies, global media players, new media, cities, regions, Non-state actors are everywhere in global politics, and the system has become much more intricate. To have political control of this situation, we need to develop and to understand complex dynamics that develop in multiple dimensions, levels, locations. We need to have an advanced understanding of the international system. And to this extent, to this goal, I try to elaborate on a few mechanisms, micro mechanisms that I think are important to understand the system in which we live. And these mechanisms are sort of shaped and sort of characterized by a common characteristics, that is the idea of hybrid politics, of the sort of coalescing and integration between governmental and non-governmental action, and that bringing in itself both a lot of opportunities and potential benefits, but equally many risks and a lot of potential costs. So this is the kind of context in which we live. I don't think we can go back. I don't think it would be very naive to think about the ability to go back to compartmentalized systems. This is not the system in which we live, and this cannot be changed. So this is the context in which we play. I suggest that we understand it well in order to avoid the costs and to get the benefits. In this system, in which, of course, there are many actors, what is important is to understand that none has overwhelming power over the other, which implies that each needs the other to further its objectives. Even the greatest power needs to engage positively with non-state actors. And here I include, as I said, many different actors. Think about, from NGOs to tech companies, and the different dimensions. So of course, security is one important. You need to be able and skillful enough to engage with them properly. There are many different actors. Of course, multinational and profit-oriented actors are an important component of that. There are non-governmental actors, NGOs classically important, local authorities, but also private or hybrid organizations, the so-called standard-setting bodies. And this idea of sort of generating and spreading standards in global governance, it's so important that we cannot really overlook that. And it's clear, if we look at from a quantitative perspective, that the sheer number of these actors has increased very significantly in the last few decades, together with the development of the so-called globalization. Okay, and they have acquired, and they are now playing many different functions, performing functions that were sort of carried out originally by governments, by public authorities. They bring new issues to the agenda, to the public agenda. They lobby policymakers. They offer technical assistance. They provide funds for both private and public players. They formulate regulatory decisions. They implement program and public policies. They provide services. They monitor the respect of international agreements. They resolve disputes. They facilitate conflict resolutions. They also help implementing decisions, so-called enforcement, in different policy domains. Non-state actors do not always operate alone to pursue those objectives. Increasingly, international institutions and national governments are developing forms of cooperation with them. Of course, they have different goals. Governments have a different agenda, but they find in practice an overlapping sort of grounds to develop a political convergence or a tactical convergence to develop and to pursue similar sort of short-term goals. At the international level, the solution to such complexity was found in the so-called multi-stakeholder initiatives based on spontaneous collaboration, participation through ownership,
power sharing, better potential for learning, and finally common action. But it is not only at the international institution level that this kind of cooperation is taking place. I was talking with a colleague today that also most traditional state-centric organizations like NATO are engaged and strive to develop a much better cooperation with NGOs. But then it's not only about international organizations, it's also governments who are engaging more and more with non-state actors. Public diplomacy is by now a common term in international affairs. And it's the idea of governments engaging with citizens of other countries directly or indirectly by engaging with NGOs in that country. Foreign policy by proxy was a common practice during the Cold War. Washington and Moscow used it intensively, if covertly. With the fall of the wall, this modality was relaunched in the mid-90s by the US during the Clinton presidency, with the sort of reform of the US aid. In time, this practice intensified and spread also to other democratic powers. The EU is a case in point, actually following the same kind of practice of the US, only with a time gap. If you think about the creation after 20 years of the European Endowment for Democracy, precisely trying to mimic the National Endowment for Democracy, very clear. But there are two consequences. There's been two consequences to this kind of spread of this modality of carrying out foreign policy through the engagement, or by proxy, through the engagement with other actors. The first reaction, the first consequence, was the backlash, with many resident governments passing laws against foreign-funded NGOs, as they acknowledge the increasing influence of these actors under the governmental screen. First. And second consequence is that those who were passive receivers of this kind of public diplomacy have learned a lesson. And so now we see basically all major powers developing these kind of activities. It's not anymore a matter of American and European democracy promotion or foreign policy by engaging with NGOs. But Russia, China, Iran, Qatar, and so many other actors are now actively engaged in developing their foreign policy through the collaboration and the synergy with non-state actors. And these transnational dynamics are here to stay. Goods and money, but also ideas, people, political support, and weapons, they all cross national boundaries, though none of them with 100% legitimacy. We are in a transition period, which has intensified in the last 30 years, but we don't have clear political guidelines on how to handle this. These new forms of transnational politics by proxy generate intense debate. All major actors practice it. All major actors denounce it. And it's thus necessary to study them in much more detail, and this is what I'm going to do here. In the remaining part of my presentation, I'm going to talk about 6 mechanisms, looking at how sort of these kind of, if you want, using a terminology from a different field, public-private partnership is developing in practice through specific mechanisms that, of course, alter the balance of power in favor of either the government or the local opposition, minority, societal actors. It is a kind of intervening variables entering into the domestic balance of power and favoring either the government or the opposition. And it's a transnational variable. It's a kind of foreign variable intervening strongly in the domestic affairs. Now, if you still think about the word of sovereignty, of course, this is not anymore the word of sovereignty. This is a word of interdependent, if you want, already from the 70s, even in that, dynamics, in which sovereignty is by degrees. And its ability to be implemented in a kind of self-determination mood has to come to some compromise with foreign influences. And I understand this is disruptive of a certain understanding of national self-determination and sovereignty. But this is the kind of world in which we live. And again, my point is that this is common experience in all countries. More or less, of course, depending on your ability. And yet, I mean, if we look at how politics is theorized, it's very ironic, because basically, when you think, I mean, if you think about all the studies about democracy and democratization, they are almost entirely focused on the idea of a self-contained community. If you go from Plato to Rawls and all the most recent democratic theorists, you always find this idea of the island, islands in which citizens elect the government reflects the interest and the preference of the citizen, and then they live happily in a democratic system. As if the rest of the world didn't exist. Now, of course, this is naive, it's a dream, and first of all, because they are not always happy, and second, because they are not isolated. No man is an island, as somebody said. This is the case. No community is an island in the world in which we live. Not even the most sort of segregated society is as, I don't know if you can think about North Korea. So what's happened? Well, it happened that there is a government, a majority or a minority, if the government is an authoritarian government, and then there is an opposition of some sort. And both will try to take advantage of the opportunities provided from foreign actors. Beyond, of course, trying to sort of winning the game at the national level. There are different mechanisms that can be identified in this kind of dynamic. One classical mechanism, which was identified more than 20 years ago by two American scholars, Keck and Sicking, is called the boomerang effect. It's a kind of liberal, rosy understanding in which you have a minority in an undemocratic country. What you might think about, I don't know, women's under the Taliban in Afghanistan, and what do? Well, they have resources outside. They can go and ask for support from Amnesty, from the European Union, from friendly governments, and by circumventing the barriers that prevent them to have a voice in public decision-making at the national level, by circumventing these barriers and sort of by the backing of international actors, they can put pressure on the government to dismantle the barriers. Okay, so through this kind of boomerang effect, you know, the Australian thing, they can empower and increase their pressure, their leverages, by sort of taking advantage of international sort of opportunities. But of course, it's not only an inside out, it's also outside in. It is also foreign non-state actors, foreign NGOs, foreign governments, foreign international organizations who will rely on local actors, local opposition, local minorities, to push their political agenda. Okay. Think about EU democracy promotion. I mean, the EU engages with NGOs in other countries to promote a certain agenda based, for instance, on the EU sort of conception of human rights, including death penalty, including other kinds of human rights, which are not always entirely recognized by other countries, even democratic countries. Is that all? No, of course. I mean, of course, this can get a bit darker and a bit unclear. Foreign governments can rely also on local military actors, local rebel groups, militias, to bring on their interests. And of course, on cyber organizations. According to cyber operation tracks, there are almost 20 countries that have used these kind of proxies for their foreign policy objectives almost 200 times in the last decade. But of course, also the government will, if clever enough, as Marx, will rely on foreign opportunities. So the government, in order to smash and criminalize and sometimes even kill the opposition, will rely on like-minded governments and like-minded foreign NGOs or foreign groups to put increased pressure on local minorities or oppositions. And this is also very common. Think about the Syria case, in which the government, Bashar, brought in governments, but also foreign non-state actors to pursue its own domestic objectives. This is not only bilateral and bidirectional, but of course there is always a scale shift. The moment you bring in foreign actors supporting local opposition and foreign actors supporting local governments will enter into political competition themselves, in a way scaling up the entire dynamic. They will not act alone, but they will act in networks, because you don't only rely on one single NGO, but that single NGO often is part of an international network or maybe a transnational campaign. So by bringing one NGO, you bring an entire network of group of NGOs on your side, or on the other side, from the government side. And then, of course, we shouldn't forget that most of these activities, or some of these activities, are carried out in a covert fashion. Governments rely, and opposition relies on this kind of support very often in a secret way. So I think we need to focus on this kind of mechanism if we want to understand, if you want the other side of that kind of great power dynamics that we were discussing in the first session. Yes, of course, there is that kind of great power dynamics, or if you want, in the state dynamic, but then this dynamic is very often carried out in conjunction or in partnership with non-state actors. On one side, the minority opposition, and on the other side, the government. And so, of course, the system is very complex, but I think it's a challenge for political leaders and political scientists to have a better understanding of these dynamics, both in empirical terms, but also in normative terms. As I said, this is an issue that enters into collision with our traditional understanding of national self-determination and sovereignty. And again, it's an issue that brings risks and opportunities. So for me, this is of the utmost, the most important significance if we want to understand our, if we want to improve our understanding of the international system. And with this, I stop. Thank you very much.